Huw's family use a combination of very modern and traditional methods here. So they take the best of modern technology, but they also use the best of well-loved, well-worn and much proven methods to keep the grass down, do all their conservation work. They do hedge laying, so all sorts of practices where they've just taken the best from every era there is to do the most efficient and most environmentally friendly work that they can.
So something we do which is quite satisfying, especially the sound, is scything the grass. And especially at this time of year, the grass can really run away with you. And as you can see, the length is quite long. But the great thing about a scythe, it really does perform quite well with long grass, because if you have a lawn and shorter grass, it can't really grab on to all of the top weight and kind of cut it down, slash it down. And what we usually do is every other year we'll have some pigs, and the pigs are for meat, and what we do is we'll come out every morning and we'll scythe a bit of an area and we'll give them the grass, and they're kind of on an 80-90% grass-fed diet, which a lot of people think is crazy, but we usually go for heritage breeds, and they cope a lot better with that, and you just have to keep them on an extra month. And so when you have pigs, it gives us an incentive to cut the grass, but when you don't have pigs, you know, let it grow a bit, but it's time to start cutting this. So, you know, you can really see that it doesn't take too much time to start covering, because I haven't done any scything since last year, but it's nice to get back into the hang of it and try and use a slightly better style than pole duck. Now you might have recognised the barn behind me. Some kind of bits of information on this holding suggests that the barn is actually older than the house, and as well, this small holding actually used to be kind of a fairly large farm. It was over 100 acres, I believe, and what used to happen was there used to be a servant who actually lived up in the top part of the barn, and that's where I go if I'm naughty. Something which I feel kind of fortunate with is being able to grow up on a small holding and land, and also learning about nature and where food comes from. I have to say, a lot of young people kind of really miss out from that experience. And you know, a lot of my friends judge me so much because here I am, like I'm in the 1800s with an Austrian scythe, and they're like, why don't I just use a strimmer? But there are so many advantages to things, and one of the main things that we did was, my parents were really inspired by things like John Seymour's book of self-sufficiency, and also a TV show called The Good Life. And so the idea with that is just being more self-sufficient and having a lower carbon footprint, and also just being more resilient, because if I was, say, using a strimmer, I'm dependent on having to use external fuel, whereas if I'm using a scythe, all the fuel that I get is from the food that we've grown on the small holding. And I think that is kind of a really good kind of description of what being resilient is all about, and about being self-sufficient. And should something happen, you know, it's getting into the prepper's idea of things, but should something happen, we know we don't have to depend on as many external things as other people would have to.
So what do you actually do with all the cut grass? You just do it as a chop and drop, or do you compost it, or?
That's a good question. We usually do this cut as, like, especially gardeners and smallholders, we all know, looking at the weather forecast is quite a common thing. So what we try and do is make sure that we have 4 to 5 dry, kind of warm, sunny days, after one another, which can be quite a challenge in this part of Wales, but it can be done. I can assure you of that. Last year it was really easy because it was just ridiculously warm and hot. But what we do, we cut it and we turn it into hay. And it's a really nice high quality hay. There's loads of different, not just grass species here, but loads of different wildflower and flower species as well. So unlike, you know, if you're then feeding hay to livestock, they have a much better diet, and having a very varied, diverse range of plants is also going to help their health and their immunity, which is very important. But yeah, we just turn it into hay. You could do a chop and drop, but just for example here, you know, what this is going to do is it's just going to smother the grass instead, and then you'll have weird dead patches. Composting grass, I wouldn't compost this grass. So there's a lot of talk about hay and dried grass and whether you can use it as a mulch. If I wanted to use this as a mulch, I would have come here probably about 2 weeks ago before all of the grasses started flowering, because then I know that there's no grass seeds in it, and you can still make hay without grass seeds and use that as a mulch. And in terms of composting, it would then have to be a hot compost. There's actually loads of things that I don't know, and I want to find out about grass and what kind of potential it has, especially for food crops, because it's such an abundant resource for us. There must be a way of composting grass in bulk, you know, to try and find an efficient way of doing that. And whether you kind of mix it with wood chip for more of a long-term thing. But what I also think is you could almost use grass, especially when it's shorter, so more like lawns and with a lawnmower. Could you use that grass to continually sprinkle around your raised beds to add most of the fertility that it needs? There's so many kind of experiments and things that are really interesting to find out, and I wouldn't be confident with just using grass mulch for everything because of slug problems and stuff, but we already use grass as a mulch for things like potatoes and a lot of our soft fruit. But I think there's a lot of potential with it, and that's a great thing about being on a smallholding. If you know, you're really fortunate. If you want to try out something, you have the space and you could find out something quite amazing, which is going to help loads of other people.
All the way around?
Yeah, but try and keep it down.
That was actually really difficult. I was expecting to pick up that scythe and kind of just be able to cut the grass, and there's not. There is a proper technique that obviously needs to be learnt. Huw filmed some of my very poor effort at literally the first couple of swings of using the scythe, and that is not as easy as it looks. I don't know why I thought it'd be straightforward, but Huw makes it look very simple, and people like Julianne over at Dirt Patch Heaven, who scythe regularly, make it look very, very straightforward. So I kind of thought, I can just have a go at that. Well, lesson learnt.
This is a pole dock scything technique. Don't even include that. You can just add that to your weird collection of Huw.